Politics of Autism, and you see on it, it says John J. Pitney Jr., but those close to you call you Jack, just like President Kennedy. So I'm sure you're okay with that comparison.
I'm very honored by it.
Thrilled that you are here, and we should say that the subtitle of this is Navigating the Contested Spectrum. Fascinating, fascinating book. You are a college professor,
Yes.
widely considered, you're an expert in American politics. And you tell us a little bit about where you teach and what you teach.
I teach at Claremont McKenna College. I've been there since 1986. Also worked in Washington, D.C. and in the New York State Legislature. So I've got the firsthand experience that I bring to bear in the classroom. Then I bring some of it into the book as well. And I write on public policy issues, health issues, and that sort of feeds into the discussion of autism.
And you are somebody who appears on many different things. I've heard you on NPR and American Public Radio, somebody who frequently people ask you your opinions about things. This is not your first book. You have covered the last 2 presidential elections in books that you have written. You're a very knowledgeable guy. And as we've all been waiting in and seeing things happening, getting ready for this next presidential election, the question keeps coming up for us, well, you know, when is autism going to be a part of the conversation? We've seen in the debates the Republicans have weighed in a little bit, but in some very bizarre ways.
Yeah.
We all felt that it was missing from the Democratic discussion recently, although you can't fit everything in. So wonderful that your book is out during this period of time, The Politics of Autism. Who is this book for?
This book is for several different audiences. In the first instance, it's for scholars, for people assigning books in classrooms, for introductory courses on public policy. I wrote it so that students could get something from it, not just about autism, but about public policy more general. So that's number one. Number two, decision makers, people like my former colleagues and staffers in Washington and Albany and Sacramento. And third is for people on the spectrum and their families, to give them some sense of the bigger picture that they see in their everyday lives.
Yeah, because one of the things that you bring up in this book is that there's no consensus. And we all feel this, everybody is in all these different diverse groups, and it's really been difficult for anything to be accomplished because of that. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about how you approach that in the book.
Well, sure. I mean, autism politics is like faculty politics on crystal meth. This is something that involves people's very identity. On the one hand, you have parents of kids who have problem speaking, have problem maintaining bowel control, and they're desperately in search for a cure. On the other hand, you have adults, high-functioning adults, who see autism or Asperger as part of their identity. And they see the talk about cure as an attack on them. And you can see it from both perspectives, and you can see the deep feelings that come into play. And so it's natural that the politics sometimes gets very fierce here. Yeah. And also what comes into play, in addition to conflict, is uncertainty. There's so much we don't know about autism. It was only identified by Leo Kanner in 1943. In fact, the first person who was ever diagnosed with autism, Donald Triplett, is still alive. Yeah. And so we don't have a really good baseline of data from previous years to know whether the true prevalence has increased. If you look at the data from the schools, the IDEA data, since 1990, the number of students receiving services under IDEA for autism has increased. But that in part is advocacy by parents. Has the real prevalence increased? We don't know for sure. Maybe it has. There's some evidence that it has, but maybe it hasn't. There are some who argue that it's a matter of changing diagnostic criteria or better awareness. And because we don't have scientific certainty, that gives rise to a great deal of conflict.
Yeah, and it is conflict. I mean, already I can tell you that we will have people write in about what you just said and say, how can you say that there isn't an increase? Because people get very emotional about these things. But I wonder if we could talk just a little bit about, obviously you're an expert in politics, why you made the decision to write about autism, how this affects you, and how, as a professor, you've got to be seeing this in your classrooms.
Sure. I've had students on the spectrum. In fact, some of my current students are on the spectrum right now, and some of my past students have been as well. In addition to that, I've had a close family member who's on the spectrum, so I've had a lot of firsthand knowledge and firsthand experience, including right here at CARD. But in writing the book, I didn't want to write a purely first-person account because there are splendid first-person accounts out there already. Catherine Maurice, to take one of many. Increasing literature by people who are on the spectrum themselves, like Ido Kedar. Wonderful, wonderful book by somebody who is non-verbal but can actually communicate with assistive devices. So instead of doing that, I wanted to piece together all the literature I could find, all the data I could find, to get a sense of what we know about the politics and policy of autism.
Yeah. And although it's like wading into a mud bath because it's very convoluted.